So we on chapter 5, vampirism. Now, I just want to point out as I'm reading this book, Psychic Self Defense. Remember the purpose of me reading this book. The purpose of it is me to help you strengthen your mind, to help you overcome any fear you have of anything spiritual, anything that got something to do with anything dark, right? Whatever that is, maybe for you. That's the point of this, is to help you overcome that fear, to know that the power is within you, and you don't have to be afraid of nothing. So, some of the stuff in this book, I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm not saying it's true. I'm not saying it's not true. The purpose is to help you strengthen your mind and your emotional state of being. So, chapter 5, psychic self defense, vampirism. All right, boom. The alleged vampire has always been a popular character in tales of mystery and imagination. There is a considerable literature concerning his doings, from the famous novel Dracula to serious studies of the medieval witch trials, for which the reader is referred to the bibliography at the end of the book. In these pages, however, I do not want to avail myself of second-hand evidence nor of incidents which took place in other centuries and under primitive conditions. For it might be argued that with the passing of such conditions from our midst, the problem of vampirism, like the problem of typhus, has gone to and need not trouble us. From my own experience, I am of the opinion, however, that this is not so, and that the peculiar condition which the ancients called vampirism may account for certain forms of mental disturbance and the physical ill health associated therewith. When psychoanalysis was first introduced in England, I took up the subject and became a student, and eventually a lecturer at a clinic that was founded in London. We students were soon struck by the fact that some cases were exceedingly exhausting to deal with. It was not that they were troublesome, but simply that they took it out of us and left us feeling like limp rags at the end of the treatment. It was exhausting. Someone happened to mention this fact to one of the nurses engaged in the electrical department, and she told us that the same patients equally took it out of the electrical machines, and that they could absorb the most surprising voltages without turning a hair. At the same place, in the course of my psychoanalytical work, I came across a number of cases where a morbid attachment existed between two people, most commonly mother and daughter, or two women friends, sometimes also between mother and son, and in one case I met socially between a man and a woman. It was always the negative one of the pair who came for treatment, and we were able to benefit them considerably by psychotherapeutic means. They always showed the same symptom complex: a sensitive temperament, pallid complexion, wasted form, and general debility, sense of weakness, and were easily fatigued. They were also invariably highly suggestible and were therefore easy to handle. Consequently, we were usually able to get good results pretty quickly in such cases. The curious point, however, was that the breaking of the morbid rapport caused a marked disturbance and even semi collapse of the dominant partner in the alliance. We found it necessary to insist upon a separation if a cure were to be effected, and the separation invariably disagreed very actively with the dominant partner. At that time, I explained everything in terms of the psychology. But even so, I could not help being struck by the curious effect a separation had upon the person who was not supposed to be ill, and that the one who went uphill, and that as the one went uphill, the other went down. I am of the opinion that what Freud, the Sigmund Freud, calls an Oedipus complex is not altogether a one-sided affair, and that the soul of the parent is drawn upon the psychic vitality of the child. It is curious how Oedipus cases always look, and what little old men and women they are as children. They never have a normal childhood, but are always mentally mature for their years. I persuaded various patients to show me photographs of themselves as children and was much struck by the elderly, worried expression on the childish faces, as if they had known all of life's problems and burdens at a young age. Knowing what we do know of telepathy and the magnetic aura, it appears to me not unreasonable to suppose that in some way, which we do not as yet fully understand, the negative partner of such is shorting onto the positive partner. There is a leakage of vitality going on, and the dominant partner is more or less consciously lapping it up, if not actually sucking it out. She's not talking about biting on people. She's talking about energy, sucking the people's energy, draining people. Y'all know how we say it these days. They draining. Some people are very draining to be around. Such cases are by no means uncommon and clear up rapidly when the victim is separated from the vampire. Whenever there is a record of a close and dominating bond between two people with the devitalization of one of them, it is a good plan to recommend a temporary separation and observe the results. But see, back then they was really getting it in. But we don't do this stuff nowadays. We just be throwing ourselves in the fire and just. At least back then they tried. They tried to help each other get out of these terrible situations. Now we don't. We just be like, oh, that ain't my business, or we just stay in the bad situation knowing we should separate ourselves. You ever notice somebody in a bad abusive relationship and they just stay? They don't separate themselves. And the people around them have gotten so used to them being comfortable with it that they just be like, fuck it. I ain't got time. I'm not gonna keep trying to go over there and help such and such out. I'm not gonna go over there and they gonna just go back right back to the person. All they had to do was at least separate themselves. I know it's easier said than done, but what you got to lose if you're gonna get the shit beat out of you anyway, it's not funny. Such cases as these, however, may more justly be described as parasitism than vampirism. Such psychic parasitism is exceedingly common and explains many psychological problems. We will not pursue the subject in these pages, however, as it is outside the scope of our present inquiry and is merely mentioned for illustrative purposes. Vampirism, as generally understood, is a very different matter, and we should do well to reserve the term for those cases wherein the attack is deliberate. Applying the term parasitism to the cases wherein it is unconscious and involuntary. So, an example would be you got a friend A will be parasitic, meaning that they're not trying to drain your energy. It's just the stuff that they always talking about, the emotions that they bring into the environment drains your energy. They might be actually a good person, They just always talking negative. They just always feel negative. They just always having a bad day. Always got something to complain about. Something went wrong all the time. All the time you see them, they tell them how life just ain't working for them. Then your friend B will be a vampire, meaning that they purposely do things to drain your energy because I assume they thrive off of this. So they purposely, intentionally drain the people's around them energy, whether it be family, friends, or whoever they could get their teeth into. In my opinion, true vampirism cannot take place unless there is power to project the etheric double. All the records of vampirism that we have given an account of something which much more tangible than a haunting. In Western Europe, the occurrence seems to be comparatively rare in modern times, but in Eastern Europe and in primitive countries, it appears to be by no means uncommon, and innumerable, well authenticated cases occur in books of travel. Commander Gold, in his exceedingly interesting book Oddities, gives an account of vampirism among the beaverlings of the Philippine Islands. His account is based on a paper printed in the Journal of the Asiatic Society, volume LXV 1896. These unpleasant people, according to Mr. Sturchley, the author of the article which Commander Gold quotes, are ghouls and must eat human flesh occasionally or they will die. When they feel a craving for a meal of human flesh, they go away into the grass and, having carefully hidden their bodies, hold their breaths and fall into a trance. Their astral bodies are then liberated. They fly away and entering the house, make their way into the body of one of the occupants and feed on his entrails. Now, like I was saying, this is not the fearmonger or anything. This just the purpose is to work on your mental fortitude and your emotional state of being because the low vibrational people and entities, whether it's a physical entity, a physical person in the flesh with a human body, or a ghost, a non physical person without a human body, they feed off of fear. They feed off of your low vibrations. So when you walk around with fear, it makes you easily accessible. When you walk around and you have faith that the power is within you, God is within you, and you don't have to fear nothing, they won't bother you. They'll go mess with somebody else. They might still try though. But once they recognize you ain't going for it, they'll leave you alone. They were like, all right, just leave this person alone because it's take too much energy to get them. We just go and get somebody else, which is why they usually prey on the weak, the elderly, and the children. But when you're strong, most people don't bother you, and you know that even in the physical realm, most people don't bother people who they know. If I try this person's gonna fuck me up. People who know that they try you, you gonna whoop their ass. They most likely won't bother you. It's the same thing as above, so below. They know. People be knowing who to fuck with and who not to fuck with. It's the same shit. The Burbelines may be heard coming as they make a moaning noise, which is loud at a distance and dies away to the feeble moan as they approach. When they are near you, the sound of their wings may be heard, and the flashing lights of their eyes can be seen dancing like wildflowers in the dark. Mr. Sketchley declares that he himself saw and heard a flight of Burbelines pass by and, visiting next day the house he saw them enter, found the occupant dead without any sign of external violence. Compare Mr. Sturchley's account of the Burbelines lying in the long grass and throwing themselves into trance with Mr. Muldoon's account of the projection of the astral body, with which every student of occultism ought to be familiar, for it is undoubtedly a classic of occult literature, being a practical account of occult experiences and detailed instructions how to go and do likewise. But to return nearer home, in the course of my experience of the byways of the human mind, which, from the nature of my work, has been like Sam Weller's knowledge of London, extensive and peculiar, I have only known one case of genuine vampirism, according to the sense in which I use the term, and that was not one of my own cases, though I knew the persons concerned, but was handled by my original teacher, whom I have already referred to in connection with the case of the good lady who chased me with a carving knife. I have made use of the facts of this case as a groundwork for one of the stories in the secrets of Dr. Taverner, but the actual facts are such that they might be unsuitable for a work supposedly designed to amuse, for entertainment. At the time, I was doing the tutorials in abnormal psychology at the clinic I have spoken of, and supervising the work of other students. One of them took counsel with me concerning a case that had come to her in private practice. The case of a youth in late teens, one of these degenerate but intellectual and socially presentable types that not infrequently crop up in old families whose blood is too blue to be wholesome. And then don't we know it's people out here who just ain't right in the they just, they just ain't right. You it's people who be born into families and they just be abused by their family. So it's not far fetched. I know it sounds like what the fuck, but we know this stuff. We already know this stuff. It's not far fetched. We hear about people being born into abusive families all the time. People being in abusive relationships all the time. It's the same shit. It's just different form, but the same substance. This lad was taken as boarder in a flat, which the students shared with another woman, and they soon began to be troubled with curious phenomena. About the same time, every evening, the dogs in the neighboring mews began a furious outcry of barking and howling, and a few moments later, the French window leading onto the veranda would open. It did not matter how often they got the locksmith to it, nor how much they barricaded it. Open it would come at the appointed time, and a cold draught sweep through the flat. This phenomenon took place one evening when the adept Z was present, and he declared that an unpleasant, invisible entity had entered. They lowered the lights and were able to see a dull glow in the corner he indicated, and when they put their hands into this glow, felt a tingling sensation such as is experienced when the hands are put into electrically charged order. Then began a mighty spook hunt up and down the flat, and the presence was finally cornered and dispatched in the bathroom. I have staged the incident somewhat more picturesquely in my story, but the essential facts are the same. The result of the dispatching of this entity was a marked improvement in the condition of the boy patient and the elicitation of the following story. The boy, whom we call D, was in the habit of going to sit with a cousin who had been invalided home from France, suffering from alleged shell shock. This young man was another scion of a worn out stock. This young man was another scion of a worn out stock, and it transpired that he had been caught red handed in that unpleasant perversion called necrophilia. According to the story elicited from the parents of D, this vice was not uncommon on certain sections of the front, as were also attacks of wounded men. The authorities were taking drastic steps to put it down. On into the family influence The cousin of D was able to escape incarceration in a military prison and was placed in the care of his family as a mental case. And they put him in the charge of a male nurse. It was while the male nurse was off duty that the unfortunate young D was misguidedly employed to sit with him. It also came out that the relations between D and his cousin were of a vicious nature, and on one occasion, he bit the boy on the neck, just under the ear, actually drawing blood. D had always been under the impression that some ghost attacked him during his crisis, but he had not dared to say so for fear of being thought of as a mad, crazy person. What may have been the exact percentage of neurotic taint, vice, and psychic attack is difficult to say, nor is it easy to decide which was the predisposing cause that opened the door to all the trouble. But one thing stood out clearly to all beholders, that with the dispatch of the psychic visitant, not only did these conditions clear up immediately, but after a short upheaval, the cousin also recovered. The method of dispatch used by the adept Z was to pin the entity into a magic circle so they could not get away, and then absorb it into himself through compassion. As he completed the operation, he fell backwards unconscious. It was, in fact, the same method that I was instructed to use in dealing with my werewolf, but it was a much more formidable task to absorb and transmute the projection of another person than to absorb one's own, and could only have been accomplished by an initiate of a very high grade, which Z was. His opinion concerning the case, though there was no means of obtaining independent confirmation of this, was that some Eastern European troops had been brought to the Western Front, and among these individuals with the traditional knowledge of black magic, for which Southeastern Europe has always enjoyed a sinister reputation among occultists. Black magic is just using the power to do wrong, to harm another. It's the same power. The same power you would use to heal somebody, it's the same power that somebody used for black magic. So, like I said, it's nothing to be afraid of. It's the same thing. So when you see us on here, when we call ourselves spiritual healers, the person practicing black magic, they're using the same power. They're just using it to harm another person, or for selfish reasons, or for something that's not for the good of the collective. And the reason why I say that, because like I said, it's nothing to be afraid of. These men getting killed knew how to avoid going to the second death. That is to say, the disintegration of the astral body, and maintain themselves in the etheric double by vampirism, the wounded. Now, vampirism is contagious. The person who is vampirized, being depleted of vitality, is a psychic vacuum, himself absorbing from anyone he comes across in order to refill his depleted resources of vitality. He soon learns by experience the tricks of a vampire without realizing their significance. And before he knows where he is a full blown vampire himself, vampirizing others. The earthbound soul of a vampire sometimes attaches itself permanently to one individual if it succeeds in making a functioning vampire of him, systematically drawing its etheric nutriment from him. For since he, in his turn, is resupplying himself from others, he will not die from exhaustion as victims of vampires do in the ordinary way. Z was of the opinion that D's cousin was not primarily vampire in the case, but was himself a victim. Being a youth of unstoppable morale, he speedily acquired the vampire tricks, and the earthbound soul of some Magyar magician exploited him. Through his act of biting and drawing blood from the neck of his cousin, the entity became transferred to young D, preferring pastors new to the depleted resources of his previous victim. Probably it alternated between the two, for it was not constantly with D. Exactly what Z did we not know, for he was exceedingly secretive concerning his methods. But in the light of subsequent knowledge, I should imagine that he absorbed the etheric energy of the earthbound soul, and thus deprived it of its means of resisting the second death, merely to drive the resistant soul out of the judgment hall of Osiris would have involved leaving behind an astral corpse, which for some time would have continued to give trouble. So even the spirit choosing to be a vampire so it won't have a second death, even that's based off fear because they don't want to die. But see, back then, it was a lot of superstition, a lot of talk of going to hell. We still do that now, but if you can imagine like 100, 200 years ago, the thought of hell was very strong onto people. So if you know you lived your life and you subconsciously you wasn't a good person, you didn't want to die and go to hell. So even the fact of somebody going into astral form after their physical death and then they're afraid to die in an astral form is just a lack of knowledge and a lack of fear. Because the truth is we don't die. We are eternal beings. But that's all that fear. See, we see what happens when you get all that fear in you. You start doing stuff. You start doing crazy stuff. That's why in the Bible it say forgive and have compassion because you being afraid to cause you to harm somebody else. You also being afraid to cause you not to stand up for yourself. And you won't have faith. You can't have faith and fear at the same time. You can't be afraid of somebody harming you and have faith that God is protecting you at the same time. So it's what it say, you can't serve two masters at the same time. A double-minded man is unstable. That's what that means as well. It may be interesting to note in connection with this case that during the time that Miss L was at the occult lodge in Hampshire, we had some rather curious happenings. There was an outbreak among us of exceedingly bad mosquito bites. The bites themselves were not poisonous, but the stabs were of such a nature that they bled freely. I remember waking up one morning to find a patch of blood the size of the palm of my hand on the pillow. It had apparently come from a small puncture just behind the angle of the jaw. Several others had similar experience. I have never seen anything like it, either before or since, nor did it occur again after Miss L left. I did not tell the adept Z about it at the time. And later, when I was reminded of the incident and mentioned it, the opportunity for investigation had gone by. He expressed the opinion that it was a vampire's work and cited similar cases which he had met with in the course of his experience. He said he had seen cases in Africa where the victim had become so bloodless that it was with difficulty that a specimen of blood could be obtained for examination, for it could hardly be induced to flow from the deliberated tissue. Nothing can be done for such cases by medical science. They are dying by inches, and yet no organic disease can be demonstrated. Nevertheless, the appearance is that of a person sinking from repeated hemorrhages. Hemorrhages, I guess. When vampirism is suspected, the thing to do is to go over that person's body inch by inch with a powerful magnifying glass and search. And the search will probably be rewarded by the discovery of numerous minute punctures, so minute that they are not discovered by the naked eye unless they reveal themselves by becoming infected and suppurated, when they are usually mistaken for insect bites. They are bites right enough, but not those of an insect. The places to look for them are around the neck, down the inner surface of the forearms, on the lobes of the ears, about the tips of the toes, and in a woman upon the breast. It is said that a person with vampire tendencies develops abnormally long, sharp canine teeth. And I have myself seen one such case, and a curious sight it was. The two canine teeth, the pair that come between the incisors and the double teeth, were half as long again as the others, and terminated in points of needle-like sharpness. True vampirism in Western Union. Western Union. True vampirism in Western Europe appears to be rare, but Z was of the opinion that many obscure cases of tropical debility in which anemia played a prominent part might be attributed to this cause. I also want to point out that now we've been awakening and we've been becoming more aware, and we've been raising our vibrations and our frequencies higher and higher. So now it's not it's still stuff going on that don't make no damn sense. You know what I'm saying? In this point of time. But since we growing and we awakening and raising our vibrations and our frequencies, it's starting to become less and less. It's actually starting to get better and better. It might not seem like it because there's so much stuff going on in the world, but on a conscious level, it's actually starting to get more better and better. You start to hear more or less about stuff like this because, for one thing, we don't think about it as much as they did back then, and for another thing, we don't have so much experience with this stuff. We just know where to go. Like people know where to go, or what happens is they put you on medication, and that just shut all the shit down. See, so you don't really hear a lot about this stuff because back then they didn't have all these doctors and pharmacies all over the place. So if somebody was experiencing spiritual psychosis or spiritual awakening, they didn't have a pill to pop and just make it go away like we do now. So, like for example, I know somebody personally who went through what you would call bipolar, right? Now, this person was explaining to me how whenever it would trigger, they would feel like a superhuman, a superhero. They would feel like they could just do anything. They would feel like they could run super fast. The fear would be gone. They wouldn't be afraid to die. They wouldn't be afraid to go places that they usually might be afraid of. They could see stuff that we couldn't see in the same atmosphere, environment, same room. And what happened was, I thought it was fascinating because the person was trying to harm nobody. But what happened was, once the police got a hold of this individual, they took him to a psych ward, gave him some medication, and all that went away. And that person don't speak on these things at all. They don't even have these experiences anymore because that part of their brain was shut down. Now, does that mean that it's over with? I doubt it. I feel like as soon as that medication wear off or it get weaker, it'll be back again. So that's not the answer. The answer is for us to learn how to deal with these things so we can truly help people. You know what I'm saying? So we can truly help people get over their mental disturbances. Peace and love. Have a nice day. I'll see y'all next time. And remember, this is not to cause any fear. This is to fortify the mental strength, the emotional state of being, to not be afraid, no matter what is going on around you. The power is within you. Peace and love. Have a nice day.